Hello, I'm Dr. James P. Comer. I'm the Maurice Falk Professor of Child Psychiatry at the Yale Child Study Center and founder of the School Development Program. The Essentials of Literacy program is an important part of our work. One of the reasons we founded the program was to try and help all children gain a good education by focusing on child development. We discovered that many of the children could do well in many areas, but some had difficulty learning to read. Now, reading in the past was important, but not as important as it is today. You could always earn a living, take care of yourself, your family, do all kinds of things in the world, be a good citizen and the like, even if you couldn't read. But today, to be able to earn a living and meet your adult tasks and responsibilities, you really need to be able to read, and reading makes it possible to learn in other areas. And so reading really is fundamental, and it really is something that every child must gain the capacity to do. Now, children learn in different ways. They live under different conditions. Some are prepared, some are not. They go to schools where sometimes they get lost in the crowd. And as a result, some children do not learn to read in the regular classroom. And we realized that many of those children got into trouble in school. They didn't do well. Eventually, some of them dropped out. They were troublemakers in school. And that is how a focus on a special program to help those children develop, and that is how the Essentials of Literacy emerged. In the Essentials of Literacy program, what we try to do is provide the children with a nurturing, rewarding experience. They interact with adults, and they focus on all 6 of the essential elements of learning to read. And they do that while interacting with caring adults, meaningful people, and they can identify with them, they're motivated by them, they're nurtured by them, and children learn under these circumstances. And when there is that focus on the essential aspects of reading under those circumstances, then many children that had difficulty learning to read in the regular classroom can learn to read in this special situation. Now, we also think by having the stations around the room, children like to move. They like to get up. They like to get involved with each other. And when they do that in a purposeful kind of way at different stations, it makes it more rewarding to them. They're more excited, they're more engaged, more involved, and more motivated to learn to read. And having adults there, some from inside, some from outside of the school, who help them learn to read and expect them to learn to read, that helps the children perform better. And we think that's the reason that this program has been so successful. It's possible to teach reading anywhere, but it is more effective in a setting where all of the adults get along with each other, where there's a good feeling in the environment in the classroom, in the school itself, where there's good interaction between the teachers and the staff and the parents and all of the people, all of the adults in the lives of the children, then it's more effective. And that's where our school development program comes in, is that what we really did and what we do in the school development program is to create an environment in which there is no fault. We don't focus on blaming people, but try to solve problems that come up in that environment. There's consensus decision-making based on what's good for children, and the adults are not arguing about what works and taking positions on what and trying to make things happen and trying to win. They focus on trying to come to a consensus about what works for children. And if one approach doesn't work, they'll try another and another. But whatever works for the children is what the adults try to do in that environment. And then thirdly, it's a collaborative, cooperative environment, where all of the adults try to work together in a way that is in the best interest of the children. And when you create that kind of environment, then the children can imitate, identify with, attach to the adults around them and be motivated to those adults to learn. And we think that's why the Essentials of Literacy program has been so effective, because it's in a larger environment in which all of the adults are working together to support the development of the children. In the series of tapes that follow, Dr. Brown and her staff will show you how to implement the Essentials of Literacy process. They will show you how to organize the classroom and how to work at each of the stations. I am sure that if you carry out the instructions that you will receive faithfully in your program, you'll get the same kinds of good outcomes that we received and that we've found in the program that we have carried out here in New Haven and elsewhere.
I'm Dr. Faye Brown. I work as Director of Child and Adolescent Development for the School Development Program, and my baby is this program, the Essentials of Literacy process. I am the director of this program. I do have a partner, though, the gentleman who really started this program many years ago, Dr. Ed Murray, standing over there, and you'll be hearing from him in just a couple minutes as he comes up to say hello to you. But I wanted to take the first few minutes just to welcome you here, to ask my boss, Dr. Ed Joyner, who is the executive director for the School Development Program, just to stand and say hello to the folks.
First of all, I'd like to welcome you, and you're here because you're going to learn this fantastic reading program. And we all know that the children who come out of school not being able to read, not being able to use language well, are the ones that typically end up in jail, or they end up in difficult situations. And so I hope that you will take this opportunity and that you will go back to your districts with a high level of fervor to make sure that this is done. I'd also like to say that Dr. Faye Brown is one of the world's best. I think that you will get that when you, after these 3 days, you will go back saying that this is one of the best trainers I've ever experienced. And her partner in crime, Dr. Ed Murray. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope that you have a great experience. And I know that you will, at the end of this period, go back and do EOL and do it well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. J. And now, Dr. Murray, it's now your time to come and say hello to the folks.
You know, growing up, I always felt policemen, firemen, teachers. And my heart goes out to the people, particularly because we spend so much time in Brooklyn. My heart goes out to those people. But you are the people that I want to hug, because you're not running into burning buildings, but you're saving lives every day. And we know that literacy is taking as many victims as all the other problems we have in the world, okay? So I'd like to hug you all and thank you for committing yourselves to teaching kids to read. So please give yourselves a big hug.
Just love to start you off by talking about why are we even doing Essentials of Literacy? You know, why are we even doing this thing? About 9 years ago or so, Dr. Comer and Dr. Joyner, who have been working with the New Haven schools for 30-something years. You know, Dr. Comer started the school development program right here in 2 schools in New Haven back in 1968, Baldwin and King schools. And he went into those schools and observed, he and colleagues of his from the Child Study Center went into the schools, and they observed that teachers were teaching hard, as you know teachers tend to do. But in so many ways, children were not learning. So many of the children were just not learning, and a lot of the kids were kind of giving up, seemed to have a sense of hopelessness of sorts. And teachers' sense of morale was very low. Teachers were blaming principals, and the principals blaming teachers, and parents blaming teachers, and there was just so much blaming going on all around the place. And in the end, the children were still not learning. Well, some of them, of course. Children are always learning, but some of them just were not learning. And so they called Dr. Murray and say, how about if you go spend some time in one of these schools and do some observations and come back and tell us some of the things that you have observed and some things that we could do to make some changes in one of those schools. And Dr. Murray spent several months just observing in the schools, and if he tells the story, he'll tell you that he worked as teacher's aides and he worked as a janitor and he did everything in the school for several months. But then he just had an insight that some of these kids that the teachers are describing as acting out, always being suspended, just being disruptive all the time, he realized that there was this thing happening with these kids. Many of them were just not reading. They just weren't reading. And so he figured out, you know what, if we can help these kids to learn to read, then we could see a big difference in their behavior patterns in the classroom. And so he decided to start Essentials of Literacy. And as we go through the program, you will notice that there are elements of other reading programs that are actually mixed up, so to speak, in this program. And that's because we do believe in taking the best practices of what's out there to really create this balanced reading program that's called Essentials of Literacy. And so Essentials of Literacy really is aimed at helping those children who very often get to 3rd grade and 4th grade and are still reading at a kindergarten level, many of them, or reading at a primer level, or perhaps, if possible, thank God for some of them, reading at a 1st grade level. But indeed, kids who are reading way below grade level, those kids who we consider to have slipped through the cracks, so to speak. And so we believe, some folks use the phrase, leave no child behind. We really do believe that in schools, we can't afford to leave any child behind, and that we have to start with this. The report of the California Reading Task Force 1998 reminded us that children who cannot read will not be successful in school or in life. Therefore, reading must be the first priority of anybody who really cares about children. And because we do care about children, because you care about children, that's why you are here. And that's why we get up every morning, as Dr. Murray said, and we go into school. I call these reminders. Another reminder. Learning to read and write is critical to a child's success in school and later in life. And then they say that one of the best predictors of whether or not a child will function competently in school and in the broader society is the extent to which that child is able to read and write. And we know that. Sometimes I'm driving down the road and I see the sign that says detour and tells you take exit so and so, and I'm like, what if I couldn't read? Where would I end up? And so I think of the folks who can't read. So many of our children who are going on to high school, reading at a 5th grade and 4th grade level. What are their chances like later on in life? What are those chances for those kids? And that's why we are here. That's why we do Essentials of Literacy. But we understand that learning to read is not just a simple thing. It is a multifaceted, very complex process, and it requires a wide variety of instructional approaches. And sometimes when we get into the classroom and we see some teachers are standing there always doing what I'm doing right now, direct instruction all the time, some kids do not respond very well to just that. And so when you see how we do Essentials of Literacy later on, the 6 stations approach where children rotate from one station to the next, doing many different activities, you'll understand why we do believe in this multifaceted, very complex approach to teaching children how to read. Now, the research shows that children who learn to read, and we can't argue with this, who learn to read most effectively are the children who read the most and the children who are most highly motivated to read, right? But this is what's interesting. The texts that children read, however, need to be as interesting and as meaningful as possible. Sometimes, when some of our children are not reading, it's not because they don't want to read. It's because we bore them to death with the materials that we present to them. We really do. We give children sometimes these very boring books, and we expect that they're going to sit there and read. Now, those of us who enjoy reading, we know that on a weekend when you sit down to read a book, you don't pick up something boring. You look for a nice mystery or a nice romance or something, you get into it, right? And so we have to make sure that the materials to which we expose our kids are very meaningful to them and they're very interesting. Now, research also tells us that children should be spending more time reading than is available in school, right? So often in schools, the day is so short, right? Teachers are pushing hard, trying to accomplish a dozen things. They're being super people. And very often they don't have enough time to even read a story to children. When I taught at Howard University, my students enjoyed when I started my class with just reading a story to them, and these were college students. And any day I started my class without a story, it's like, what happened to our story today? It does something to people. You know, my partner over here, he likes to talk about adjusting the schema, getting everybody on the same page, so to speak. And so reading those stories to the kids, that's so important. But we don't have enough time in the day in schools to do all that. And so we need to make sure that our schools have the resources to send a book home with our children every day. And that's what EOL does for our kids. When you start EOL, we are asking that you have enough books in your supply that every day a book goes home with every child. Every day. Because you know what that does? It really helps to connect the homeschool connection there. It makes it easier for you to be in touch with parents, or parents to know what's going on in the schools. And as the research tells us here, they should read at home on a regular basis, usually 20 to 30 minutes every day. But this is what's important. And when we saw this, we were like, did these people look at our program and copy from us? Because this last part of it just really intrigued us. Now, this was written 1998. EOL started in 1991. And they're telling us here, parents can be asked to send in signed forms indicating that they have read with their children. That's a built-in component of the EOL program. And we started that back in 1991 when we started EOL. When you see the materials that we will be sending into your schools, and when Dr. Murray, or no, actually Mrs. Sheila Brantley later on, when she does the story station with you, she will show you the parent consent, the parent form that goes home every day that says to the parent, read to your child, how many pages have you read, what's the title of the book, and so forth, and they send that back to the school every single day. So that's a part of your EOL program. Because we really do believe that parents are teachers too, right? First teacher, that's right. But real reading is comprehension. It's more than just decoding, right? Real reading is comprehension. When our children are reading, we need to know that they are understanding what they are reading. And so that's one of the things that we help to do at the story station in EOL, at the guided reading station in EOL. We help to make sure that children are really reading, that they're understanding what they're reading. Children need to read a wide variety of, here comes the word again, interesting, comprehensible materials, which they can read orally at 90 to 95% accuracy. Now, we all know that 90 to 95%, that's like instructional level, right? But if they can go above 95%, that's independence. And that's where we need for children to get to. We need to know that our children have become so proficient and so fluent at reading that they can pick up a book and they can just read that book at 95% accuracy. And you know what? When they start off in EOL, those third graders, they might start off reading at a primer level, as I'm going to show you some data later on. But by the end of that school year, many of those children, starting off a primer, will get up to at least second grade, but several of them will get to third grade because of the kind of experiences that they will have in the reading room. Later on, as Mrs. Brantley covers the story station with you and the listening station, she will talk about this important point. You see, when we were young and our parents read to us, they read to us, but they talk about, what do you like about this story? Oh, let's see what else is happening, right? Remember those times? Let's see what else, what do you think is going to happen next? And we got so involved in the story. But sometimes in school, we want to finish the story so quickly that we don't have the children talk about the story. But these researchers from the International Reading Association, the reading teacher, that journal, it says that it is the talk that surrounds the storybook reading that gives it power. And we understand why, because when children learn to speak well, when they can think critically, when they can respond to us in a meaningful way that says, you know what, I heard that story. I can follow sequentially. I can tell you what happened in the beginning. I can tell you who the characters are. I can tell you the setting where it took place. I can tell you some of the events in the story. I can tell you the problem. What was the problem? Ooh, wow. And I can tell you the solution. And if you ask me to give you a different ending to that story, if you ask me to take it from where the story happened, the story I just heard, to bringing it back to my time right now in my neighborhood, I can do that too, because I understand the story. And so if we can engage kids in talk, that will give the story power and will help them to know that, you know what, they are indeed engaged in what's going on. And of course, that also helps the kids. Allowing them to talk about the story will help them to bridge what's going on in the story to what's happening in their own lives. Again, children will learn to read very often when the materials are interesting to them, when the materials are meaningful to them, and when they can make those connections. And when Dr. Murray does a phonics station later on, he will talk about helping to make those connections to real life events. Now, Essentials of Literacy as a reading program can stand alone. Anybody in any school across the country, or even in Jamaica, can do the reading program very well. But we have chosen over the past several years to do the program in Comer schools. Schools that have taken on the Comer process as their reform effort. And the reason why we have selected to do that is because those schools already have the processes in place that will really help to make EOL work very well. Meaning that if those schools really are doing Comer, they would be practicing these three guiding principles, right? Collaboration, consensus, and no fault. Not only would the adults be practicing these principles, but the teachers would also bring these into the classroom, where children understand about collaboration, how to work well with each other. When you're working in groups cooperatively, how do I get along with my partner at the table and so forth? Teachers bring that into the classroom. They bring the notion of consensus, come into agreement about something that we're doing in the class as a group. And the whole concept of no fault, that is something that if I had another hour, and I don't, we could just talk no fault for the next hour. No fault in the classroom. And that's what, you know, when you go back to your buildings and you do EOL, you're going to really be seeing this, that we have to treat our children in no fault ways. We have to take on that no-fault orientation in dealing with our kids. Because indeed, it is not their fault that they have gotten to third grade or gotten to fourth grade and they can't read. They haven't failed. The system has failed them. And so we can't have teachers who go into those schools and scream at them, sit down and shut up and don't let me see you move. You hear me? And you might say, oh, Dr. Brown, that doesn't happen. Teachers don't talk like that. Yeah, right. We know some of those teachers in our next door rooms that sometimes we have to say, we can't believe that Mrs. So-and-so is really talking the way that she's talking. Now, to whom is she talking? But if you're like me, you'll go next door and say to Mrs. So-and-so, you can't do that in this school, my sister. This is a Comer school, right? And in Comer school, we treat children in no-fault ways. We don't scream at them. We don't shout at them. Because we understand that this important concept in Comer that's called understanding children from a developmental perspective, which I'm going to get to real quickly about developmental pathways in the reading room. But I just wanted to show you this, that EOL really is embedded in this overall SDP process, that the parents are involved in EOL. In your school, if you have a good parent team, an effective parent team, if you really want to see EOL work very well, get your parents involved. Parents can be our greatest allies in schools. And parents know that their children aren't reading on grade level. They know that. They're very concerned about it. And when we select those students for EOL, and we send the letters home to the parents, and I will show you later on some of the materials. I'll show you the manual that we have, and there is a letter that's in there that you could modify to send home to parents to tell them we have this exciting program in our school because we understand that your child is a bright, talented child, but he's not reading on grade level. He's not reading up to his potential, and we know he can, or we know she can. And so we have come up with this wonderful program to move your child to the greatest potential. And so we'll show you that later on. But get the parents involved. If you have a parent team, get them involved in what you're doing in the school overall, but with EOL in particular. The school planning and management team. If you are a Comer school, you have an SPMT. If your SPMT is not fully functioning, then when you go back, tell the principal we have to get our SPMT up and running. Because every program that comes into your school really needs to go through your SPMT, including EOL. And your SPMT should be talking, among themselves all the time to say, is that program working well? We brought that program in here to help our kids who can't read. Is it doing what it purports that it would do? If not, what are the barriers? How can we move it forward then? And if you need a little bit of resources sometimes to perhaps purchase some more materials, then your SPMT would be the team that you would go to get those resources. So your SPMT needs to be involved with this program. Your SSST. Now we understand that our children come to us with barriers sometimes, barriers to their learning. And I think I told some folks some time back that I think when I'm passed from this world, one of the messages for which I will be remembered is this one, that I really believe strongly that for the most part, children behave the way they feel. For the most part. That when children behave badly, it's because they're feeling badly. Something is blocking psychologically. Some kind of stressors in their lives that just overwhelm them, and they're feeling like, I can't make it. One of my favorite, and don't get too upset with me, you draw from what you know, right? One of my favorite pastors, preachers, is the Reverend Dr. Beecher Hicks Jr. at the Metropolitan Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. Now the brother can preach. Now, I'm not trying to convert anybody here now, but on Sunday I was listening to one of my favorite messages from Dr. Hicks, and the title of that message was, Whatever Happened to Hope? Whatever happened to hope? And as he preached and he got so excited, he said, whatever it is that you want to do, don't take away my hope. Don't you take away my hope. And when I think about our children, sometimes I'm thinking that many of our children come to us feeling a sense of hopelessness. A sense of hopelessness, a sense of I don't belong anywhere, I don't belong to anybody. Why am I even bothering to come to school? Because it doesn't matter that I'm here. I can't cut it. I can't make it. And Dr. Comer is saying when those children have those experiences and those feelings, we can help them. The teachers can help them in the classroom, but there is a team here that can help those kids. The team is made up of the psychologists in the school, the sociologists in the school counselor, the school nurse, some teachers, the principal, and anybody else who really is involved with child development theories and so forth in your school. And these are the people who say, you know what? These children might be dealing with some disabling factors, but we can change those around to make sure that we find some enablers for them, to push them to perform to their highest level. And as we talk about the pathways in just a couple minutes, we'll talk about how we can really help children develop along those 6 pathways and how this SSST can really help. And so in terms of EOL, if we have children who've been selected for the reading room and they're acting out somewhat, we're never alone, because that team can be called upon the SSST to help us to help those children. So they're important to this program too. If you are doing EOL or any other program in your school, it should be written into your comprehensive school plan, because your comprehensive school plan articulates your goals and your objectives for the year, right? And it helps you because you use data to write that plan. And if your data are showing you that you have 3rd graders who are reading at kindergarten level, then you have to say, okay, one of our goals is that we're going to make sure that we move these kids to make sure that they're reading on grade level. And so one of your strategies then would be using EOL. And so that will be written into your plan. If it's not written in yet, when you go back, you got to write it into your plan. Because somebody has a way of saying what gets written into the plan gets assessed. And if it's not written there, you might just overlook it. But you want to make sure that you are assessing and modifying all the time. This program or any other program, is it working well? Dr. J has a way of telling us when we go to meetings that we need to ask 3 questions. What's working, what's not, and what can be done differently? What should we do differently? So is this program working well? If not, what do we have to do differently to cause it to work well? Because if we really do believe that this program can help to move children, then we have to do whatever we need to do in our schools to get this program to work well. And staff development, that's what we're doing here right now. Here, and we will come into your schools as much as we possibly can to help to make sure that if you're having some barriers implementing this, that we'll sit with you, we'll ask you, okay, what's going on? What can we do differently? Who else might have joined your team that needs training to help to move this program? But importantly, right here, the foundation of the SDP really helps the reading room to work very well. And I say the reading room because Essentials of Literacy takes place in a reading room. And I'll describe to you shortly what the reading room really is. But the foundation is important, understanding the notion that children develop along 6 critical pathways. And if you're part of coma for long, you would know those in your sleep. And we're going to go over them shortly as to what the pathways are in the reading room. And very importantly, right here, relationships. It's all about relationships. In the reading room, it's about relationships. I tell folks all the time, don't let me come into the reading room and see any of those 6 individuals, those adults who are working with those kids, talking to those kids in a way that makes those kids want to cower with fear. Don't do that. We have to talk to the kids in a way that make the kids feel valued daily. So relationships, very, very important. Let me just share with you quickly what Dr. Comer says about this whole thing about relationships. Dr. Comer says that where there is a good climate of relationships, there is academic achievement. And you can't accomplish the business of socializing kids and making gains all at the same time. One need not interfere with the other. And I tell folks that sometimes when we as teachers see children not performing well in our classrooms, check their perception of the relationship between me, the teacher, and them. When children feel that teachers like them, they want to do the work just to please the teacher. I don't want to be late because Miss Brown's going to be upset if I'm late. I got to be at class on time. Or I have to do my homework. Ma, I have to do my homework. I can't make Miss Brown be disappointed in me. I have to do my homework. That's a child who feels the teacher really cares, right? When there's a good relationship. But then there is that other child who will say, who does she think she is? She don't even talk to us, but she wants to give us that work to do. I ain't even going to do her stupid work. It becomes her stupid work. There's no ownership because, you know what, she don't like me, I don't like her either. So I ain't going to do her work. But here is what my good friend Carl Rogers has to say about relationship. Never met the man, but he's my good friend, right? When I came across this quote, I thought, no, this really captures it. And I'm going to read it straight from there. Rogers maintained that the teacher's skills, knowledge of the field, curricular planning, lectures, and selection of books and other learning aids, they're all peripheral to the learning experience. Because at the crux of the learning situation is the relationship that exists between the facilitator or the teacher and the child. And this relationship, he says, should be characterized by realness, valuing, and empathy. Realness. Children like to know that teachers are real people, right? That's why when a child sees his teacher in the supermarket when he's with his mom, he says, Ma, look at Miss Brown. Hey, Miss Brown. Feels good, right? You're real to them because you're in the same supermarket. You're shopping. Oh, my God, Miss Brown actually shops. She uses the same laundromat. She's real. And in the classroom, she treats me like I'm a real person and she behaves like she's a real person. It means a lot. It helps to establish the relationship. And valuing. Every one of us likes to know that we're valued. Children have the same needs. They like to know that they're valued. When teacher comes in, I remember when I was in school, when I was back home in Jamaica, my 3rd grade teacher was one of my favorite teachers. And she used to like to give me a brand new pencil that was beautifully sharpened. Because she knew I loved my pencil with a nice little, what do you call it? Point, long point, just nicely sharpened. Now, when I got one of those, ooh, wow, I felt so special. Oh, Miss Walters loved me because of that one little thing. And so children like that. when we value them, we do little things to value them. And one of those things, it starts with not shouting at them. When they do something that we consider to be out of place, find a way to let them know, but in a kind way, in a no-fault way. And that's what we do in the reading room with our children, because the children who are selected for the reading room, many of them are already broken because they have gotten to 3rd grade. And they watch their colleagues in the classroom, their classmates, reading, raising their hands to read, and they just sit there because they know they can't read. They feel badly. And you know, when children sometimes act out, it's because they say, well, I can't read, but I'm not going to let the teacher have the control. I'm going to take the control out of her hand, and I'm going to act out. That's my way of protecting myself, acting out in class. And so we need to make sure our children are valued, and that happens in the reading room. It happens in the reading room. And of course, empathy, empathizing with children, knowing, putting ourselves where they are. But let's talk about the pathways, though, in the reading room. Dr. Comer reminds us all the time that in this society, we're working against the traditions of this society. Because we know that in school, as educators, we are constantly being bombarded by the demands that say to us, get those test scores up, right? You hear this all the time. And schools are measured according to their test scores. They are ranked against other schools and other districts according to their test scores. And when certain schools perform so-called poorly, and they are ranked against other schools that perform well, then somehow teachers start to feel badly. You know, this sense of morale actually falls, because it's like, man, we were working so hard last year. I mean, we were here so late some days. We worked one-on-one with some of these kids. You know, why is it that we are being blamed that we're not doing the job well? And some teachers feel so badly, especially when the newspaper picks up the story and publishes this list of poor performing schools. And they do it out of context without knowing all the contextual factors against which you work every single day. And so Dr. Coleman says, you know, it is so terrible that we all have to always deal with those negative comments, because very often we are being measured in one arena, the cognitive or the intellectual. And the people who are making those policies and making those demands on us, they tend not to realize that children are not brains on sticks. They're not brains, are they brains on sticks? Sometimes I think people think that children are brains on sticks. You see these little sticks, and the sticks have a head, and in the head is a brain, and that's all we have to pay attention to, right? Just pour that information into the brain. Pour it in. And because it's only a stick, you don't have to worry about anything else. But children are whole people, just like we are whole people. If when I got up this morning, I got up with one of those bad headaches that I sometimes have, I perhaps could not be standing here talking to you in the way that I'm talking to you right now. I would just want to be sitting down someplace in a dark room, just taking some Excedrin or whatever and wanting to just go to sleep, wishing for the headache to go. I wouldn't want to be standing here talking about engaging in any cognitive activities. When children come before us sometimes and they're not performing well in this area, Dr. Comer says, let's not give up on them so quickly, thinking that they can't because somehow their genes did not prepare them well enough to perform well. It's not about genes. It's about other things that are happening with these children. And so he says we have to consider children as they develop along 6 critical pathways. And that sometimes when they're not performing well here, it's because they're blocked someplace else. It could be physical. It could be language, it could be psychological, ethical, or social. And so let me quickly talk about these 6 pathways in the reading room. Starting with the physical pathway, Dr. Joyner always says it starts with the physical, because the physical holds the brain. The physical, if you're not a physical being, then nothing else is there. So he says start with the physical. So the physical pathway in the reading room, and I even talk about the setting of the reading room. When you go back and you set up your reading room, and I say it should be an attractive place. It should be a nice room. Schools on a whole should be nice and clean. When children walk into schools and see those messy floors and things, it sends a message to them that you are not valued enough. So we can't even pay a janitor or custodian person to clean this place up. Children get those messages. Because when they go next door across the rail and they walk into Mrs. John's school and they see how beautiful it is, they say, oh my God, look at this school when compared to our school. So the very appearance of the reading room, the very appearance of the school is important to the kids. So when you set up those reading rooms, as any other classroom, it should be a place that feels good to the adults, but to the students. When we go over the stations with you later on, you'll understand that the reading room will have 6 stations. And in those 6 stations, children will be rotating. Every 15 to 20 minutes, they'll be rotating from one station to the next. And so the very built-in movement of the program will help the kids to not be feeling bored. They don't have time to feel bored. And some of the kids that you will select for the reading room, you might find that some of these kids are the ones that have been targeted by their teachers as the ones who are acting out. The ones who are always being disruptive in the classroom. And one of the reasons why many of those kids are being disruptive in the classroom is, again, because they can't read, so they're acting out. And sometimes because they're engaged in doing the same thing over and over for 50 minutes or the same boring task, they tend to just get off task. And so in the reading room, just the very movement help the kids to stay on task. In the reading room, we have what we call Celebration Day on Fridays or so forth, where we really help the kids to celebrate their accomplishments in terms of the number of words or so that they have really learned that week. And so as we celebrate with them, we give them taste of certain foods. The letters that you're discussing that week, if you're discussing B, for example, on Friday you might want to bring in some B foods. And kids might tell you they want some stuff that's junk food that start with B. But you say to them, well, we want to introduce you to some healthy foods that start with B. It could even be some bananas, but something that's healthy for them. And hey, every once in a while, a little bit of junk food won't hurt nobody, but don't tell anybody I say so. But in the reading room, though, we find that sometimes when children are not reading, it's because something could be wrong with their vision. Something could be wrong with their hearing. They're not hearing the teacher well. It's not because they're being rude to the teacher. Something is wrong. And so because Dr. Murray and I, we saw this ourselves in a reading room. We actually went in one day and we were observing and we saw a little boy reading like this. I mean, the book was so close to his face. And for weeks, nobody noticed that. You remember Dr. Murray? For weeks, nobody noticed that. And we looked at each other and we were like, what's going on here? Went to the little boy. The little boy needed glasses. Matter of fact, at home, he wears glasses. But children, they're afraid to wear glasses in the classroom because other children tease, mock, jeer. And so in a Comer school, though, the teacher would take some time to establish the kind of environment in the classroom where she could talk to the kids and say, sometimes in life, some of us need to wear glasses. It's not because we are 4 eyes, as people would call us. It's because we just need to be able to see a little bit better. And it's not just adults who need those glasses, but sometimes children do too for different reasons. And so in our class, if we see our classmates wearing glasses, let's really agree, let's come to consensus that we're not going to jeer, that we're not going to mock, and so forth, and have a great discussion with the kids. And so the kids who would wear glasses could talk about how that make them feel, and the ones who don't wear glasses could also talk about how they would feel, and so on and so forth. And so set the environment in the classroom so that the children could wear glasses. And so we talked to those teachers, and afterwards, the little boy started wearing his glasses and started to read much better. So it was just a matter of the fact that he needed glasses. So sometimes in terms of the pathways, we will find out that it's not because something is wrong cognitively, but physically, if things are not working well, then students could be really off task. The language pathway. Now, those of you who are in schools where you have a lot of children who are from different places, they have some language barriers. And we know that when they're not performing well in schools, it's not because they can't too, it's because of the language barrier. And some of you are working very hard. You're doing your immersion programs, you have your bilingual classes, you have a lot of different programs going on. And you're doing all that because you want the kids to perform to their highest potential. In the reading room, in some reading rooms, even right here in New Haven, they actually have some of their bilingual students in the reading room. And they find that by doing this program with these kids, they really are pushed real quickly. And so in terms of the reading room, we do believe that activities in the room really help kids to develop their expressive language and their receptive language. And so some of the things that we do, students listen to a tape story and they follow along in the book. You will see that later on with Mrs. Brantley doing the listening station. Once per month, children will record their own story. And we will use that as a kind of oral history that the kids could see where they were when they started and several months later on where they've gotten to. They listen to themselves on tape. If parents come into the room and say, how is my child doing? Dr. Murray loves to say, you can just say, let me let you hear for yourself. And you take that tape recorder out and you put that tape in, and the mother listens to the first reading when the child looked at the word the and said, couldn't pronounce it, see the word W-A-S and didn't know what it was just stumbling. And then 2 months later on, that child is just reading. And the mother is saying, wow. So that happens. Students engage in different reading activities, silent read, partner reads, read alouds, and all those things in the reading room that really help them to develop those language skills. At the writing station, as tomorrow when Miss Brantley comes in to do that, another Brantley, she will show you that at the writing station, students are actually encouraged to engage in discussions. Again, developing those critical thinking skills, developing those language skills. Because every Monday morning, you will notice as they go through that, you start off with a story web, where children are webbing those stories and they're giving their input, and so they really are talking. Nobody's going to be sitting down there silently, oh, I can't say, because the environment in the room will be such that every child will know it's okay to speak. It's okay to speak, even if you have a Jamaican accent. It is still okay to speak in the reading room. And the last one says that students are accepted despite any language differences, and they are supported to overcome any challenges. That really does happen in the reading room. And let me just hurry on. But this is so important for us to go over, though, because I really do want us to really understand the connection of the pathways to the reading room. Cognitive pathway, the whole notion here is to build on the cognitive strength of every student, understanding that even though they come into the reading room with something in common, that they're reading below grade level, they're still all individual students with their individual cognitive strengths. And so we have to build on the cognitive strengths of students individually. And then at the different stations, we should try to make the connection with students for what they're learning in their books to what's going on in real life, which is what I said earlier when I was going over those research reminders, that students need to make those connections. And when they can make those connections, you will start to hear students talking in ways that make you say, wow, I didn't know that Johnny was so smart. Because he's really making the connections of what he sees in the book to what he actually knows in his own life. The social pathway. The reading room is set up so that children work in groups of 4. So there are about 24 kids in a classroom and 6 stations. So you have 4 kids at a station. So kids are working in small groups. And so as these children work in the small groups, you will find that this small group design really nurtures children and help to promote their development along the social pathway. Because just imagine, you are 4 children at a table. How are you going? And there's an adult at the table with you. You can't afford to be acting out. And if someone is at the table who is different than you are, whether in speech, whether in some other way, then you're not going to want to really be teasing and mocking and jeering. There are 4 of you at the table, and there's an adult there with you. So therefore, you're going to try your best to treat each other in what we call socially appropriate ways, really respecting one another in those small groups. And I'm going to go on to the ethical pathway. There are several more things to say about the social pathway, but it's all in your manuals. When you get your manuals, you'll see the rest of those things. Ethical pathway. Let's talk about number 1, the interaction in the reading room. Interaction between the adults, between adults and students, and between students should demonstrate respect for self and others. That is so key. Jan has a way of, she has one on right now. She has a button that says modeling matters. And we really do believe that we have to model respect for our children. Children tend to do what they see the adults around them doing. And if we are treating each other in ways that are disrespectful, children will tend to do the same things. And so we say in the reading room, let's model respect for self and respect for others so that our children will really develop those very good habits. Number two, one of the things that I like to tell people is that there must be established principles in the reading room for the adults and for the children. For example, no verbal abuse. I don't even have to say no physical abuse because that's a police matter. Even though some teachers, sometimes when they feel that they lose it, they might grab a child by the hand or so forth. You can't do that, right? Because those parents don't like to see anybody else grabbing their child, right? And so no abuse in the reading room, no physical abuse, certainly no verbal abuse. And we really do believe that in the reading room because when some teachers in some other classrooms might get away with talking loudly to children, shaming them, so to speak, embarrassing them in front of their colleagues, in the reading room, it's a no-no. I call it a non-negotiable in the reading room. Can't be screaming at children in the reading room. They're already damaged, as I said before. They know that they can't read, so they're feeling badly. Why should we make them feel even worse by screaming at them and shouting at them, damaging them more, so to speak? So we ask that if you are not doing the reading room yourself, when you go back and you're training your folks, remind them, no verbal abuse in the reading room. It's a non-negotiable. And this is something that Dr. Murray really reminds us about all the time. If a student behaves inappropriately, or what we deem to be inappropriately, the student should be helped to examine his or her action by us, the adult, asking that child, was that a good decision or a bad decision? Look at that behavior and you tell me, was it a good decision or bad decision? And children know. They know when they've done something bad. They know because they look at you, and if they know that they just pulled someone here real hard and that person, ouch, you just hurt me. And you look at Johnny, was that a good decision or a bad decision? You just pulled Mary's hair a while ago. A bad decision. Okay, so if it's a bad decision, what should you do? Oh, I guess I should apologize. Okay, well, let's do that then. You know, go ahead. Sorry, Mary. Okay, now let's go on now. You know, Dr. Murray has a way of saying, he said on the tape, you know, you help them to examine that behavior and then you let them know what the behavior should be. And then let's get on with it. Because our purpose here is to help children to understand that the more good decision they make, the better they will be as adults. Because we are helping to develop our children to become the best possible human being that they can become. And it starts right there with them in the schools. It starts right there with them in the reading room. So we are helping them to make good decisions, particularly in challenging situations. Because children have to understand that we all have problems. Everybody has problems. It's not the problem that is the problem. It's the way we handle the problem that could become the problem, right? It's not the problem. We all have problems. And so we have to teach our children how to really behave in challenging situations. And the final pathway, and the one that I could spend an hour on, but I won't, is the psychological pathway. We do believe, and I have the word here perceived, but I was looking at that last night and saying, no, really, I shouldn't say perceived, I should say experienced. The reading room should be experienced by students as a safe environment, one in which they will feel secure about what they know instead of feeling insecure about what they don't know. It should be safe. You know, we talk about safety for children in schools, and sometimes people tend to emphasize the physical safety, and that's important. The physical safety is truly important, but psychological safety, we can damage children on a daily basis without even knowing that we're damaging them. Dr. Comer has a way of saying that every interaction we have with every child every day, we're either helping to promote development or to impede development. And we should endeavor to make sure that we're always promoting, never impeding. So that's important. Students should be able to be encouraged to develop a sense of self-acceptance about their current level. Not that we're going to look at them and say, sweetie, you can't read, but that's okay. We're not going to do that. But we shouldn't be attaching stigmas to them. They shouldn't feel stigmatized because they can't read. They should know that they're accepted and that, sweetie, you might not be able to read on grade level right now, but when Miss Brown finished working with you, boy, you're going to be reading any book you pick up. You're going to be able to read that book. And then, at every station, students' efforts should be encouraged and rewarded. When children who have not been performing well, when children who have developed what Erickson referred to, or not necessarily Erickson per se, but Erickson along with Bernard Weiner and others have called a sense of failure, a history of failure. When children have developed a history of failure, when they're not accustomed to hear, good job, oh, I'm so proud of you. When they have not been accustomed to hearing that, when they come to the reading room and you say that to the student, good job, Johnny. Wow, you wrote that paragraph all by yourself today. Way to go. Good job. Well done. Thank you. I'm happy to see that you're trying so hard. When they hear those positives, and we're not just giving it to them just for giving it to them's sake, we're giving to them because they've earned it, because we don't believe in just giving rewards when rewards are not really earned. But they have earned those rewards in the reading room because they might not have been doing well before, and all of a sudden they're trying, they're making the effort, and so we reward those efforts. But number 4 is the one that I really say, here comes another non-negotiable. At every station, every day, every child must experience some level of success. The reading room is set up with that in mind. Every child in the reading room every day experiences some success. And guess how it happens? 6 stations. Let's take Johnny. Johnny goes to the listening station. He listens to a story on tape, and he's following in the book. If he's not able to follow every word in the book, he's still hearing the story on tape. And if the adult at the station asks him to fill out a form, but he can't fill it out, but he can tell her something that he's heard on tape, that's success, right? That's success. Then Johnny goes to the story station, and an adult reads a story to Johnny. And the adult asks Johnny to retell the parts of the story, using some of the words in the story, but using some of his own vocab words. And Johnny might not be able to tell everything in the story, but he can tell some parts of the story. That's success, right? That is success. He goes over to the vocabulary station, and he learns 5 new words today. 5 new words today in the space of 15 minutes. That is success, isn't it? It is success. And then Johnny goes over to the phonics station. And at the phonics station, they're doing onsets and rhymes, and they're doing word building. And somehow they're using the word, the rhyme ACK. And he has all his onsets, and somehow he can come up with 15 words using the onsets and the rhymes. That is success. Lots of success. He goes to the guided reading station, and the person at the guided reading station helps him to say, okay, you have your book, you have your book. You're going to partner Johnny with little James here, and you guys are going to read to each other. He might not be able to read fluently, but he's trying hard, sounding out those words, looking for familiar pieces, chunking and so forth. He's experiencing success. He's experiencing success. And then he goes to the writing station, because we do believe that reading and writing go together simultaneously. He goes to the writing station, and little Johnny so far has never written a whole sentence. Not at all. He's 3rd grader, but he has not written a whole proper sentence, because so far he's always telling teachers, I can't, I don't know how to. And people just kind of let him slide by because they accept that Johnny can't. But somehow the person at the writing station helps Johnny to say, okay, Johnny, you might not be able to write the sentence yourself, but Miss Brown would love for you to tell me your sentence, and I'm going to write it on this sentence strip for you. And so Johnny dictates his sentence, and Miss Brown writes his sentence on a sentence strip, and then reads it back to Johnny and says, Johnny, was this what you told Miss Brown? And Johnny says, yes. So Johnny is now seeing for the first time his own words coming from his mouth now, written down. And then Miss Brown goes ahead and says, okay, now, Johnny, you read this back to me. And you point at every word as you read. And Johnny does. He might not be reading because he recognizes, because he might be reading it from memory, but he's pointing, though, as he reads. And then Miss Brown says, okay, I'm going to make sure Johnny does understand this. And so Miss Brown cuts up his sentence into what we call meaningful units. We make it into a puzzle. And then we give it to Johnny and say, okay, no, you put the puzzle pieces in the right order for Miss Brown. And Johnny puts the puzzle pieces in the right order. And then Miss Brown says, okay, no, Johnny, you read the sentence for Miss Brown again. And Johnny reads that sentence. Isn't that success? It is success. And so that's why I say to folks, every day, at every station, every child must experience some success. And if it doesn't happen in your reading room, close it down. Close it down, because you're not doing essentials of literacy effectively. If every day, every child in your reading room does not experience some success, then you got to close that room down because you're not doing it well. Or if you don't close it down, assess and modify. Assess and modify, because something ain't working right. Something is not working right. And you notice I can switch too, right? I go to the ain't and the won't and everything else. It's called high sense of intelligence. Okay? And final point along the psychological, the climate of the reading room must foster positive feelings for the students and the adults. Must foster positive feelings. When you walk, if you're the principal, when you walk into the reading room, it must feel good. I walk into some reading rooms here in New Haven, sometimes I just pop in. Dr. Maury and I, we just pop in on a daily basis. And I walk into, like when I walk in, for example, and most of these reading rooms in New Haven really are working well. I'm just using this one because it was the last one I went to the other day. I walked into Brennan on Friday, and man, I tell you, noise all around the room. Sweet, beautiful noise. Children were engaged. They were learning. They were having fun, but they were learning. And each facilitator was just active, involved. Nobody was sitting down there like this. Come on, boys and girls, do what you got to do. I got to go now, you know, look at come on, hurry up. Nothing like that was going on. Every facilitator was engaged. Okay, come on, Johnny. Okay, good. And they weren't putting on a show for me because they didn't know I was coming. They didn't know I was coming. But that room felt good, it looked good, and that's how your reading room should be. When anybody walks in, if Dr. James Comer is visiting Richmond, Virginia, and he stops by to see your reading room, he should walk in and say, wow, this feels good. But more importantly, or most importantly, it should feel good for every child who walks in. And when the parents come to visit, they should feel good about being in that reading room. The climate should be such that children feel, what a place to come every morning and to learn. And we find that in schools where they're doing the reading room, that the children who were not selected for the program start getting jealous, saying, why can't we be in that room? We want to go into the Essentials of Literacy reading room because the other students come out and they're talking about all the wonderful things that are going on in the reading room. And so the students who were not selected for the program start to feel jealous. I've got to share this one with you, because I think this sums it all up. An educator, Neil Postman, he has this reminder for us. And every training that I do, I think I tell folks this, because I think that this is such a powerful reminder to us. Children are the messages we will send to a time that we will never see. And when you stop and think about it, it's logical, right? It's a logical statement. Children are the messages we will send to a time that we will never see. And so we who are writing those messages, we who are developing those messages on a daily basis, have to make sure that we are developing positive messages, positive, life-enriching messages. Because if we do not develop positive messages, and somehow our interactions with children are negative and therefore cause them to develop negative behaviors, then we are sending negative messages into the world. And unfortunately for some of us, we will never see that we have sent some negative messages into the world. But we have to make sure that everything we do, we remember. Every child with which we interact, we look at that child and say, a message that I'm sending into the world. Faye Brown, what kind of message you want to send as you send little Tony into the world? Faye E. Brown, what kind of message do you want to send out as you send Charles out into the world? What kind of message? And so if I am reminded of that every day that I interact with every child, I will start to become more cognizant of my behaviors with those children, making sure that I am sending only positive messages. The reading room is a place where we do encourage the development of positive messages.